guys. The Earth Prize is the biggest environmental competition for youth, age 13 to 19. And once you join the Earth Prize, you will get access to one-on-one mentoring, really cool online workshops, a community of like-minded students. So we really do encourage everybody to join, and you can find out more by scanning the QR code on this slide. So this is where you'll find all the information, deadlines, how the process is going to look like. And so I know that it might be a little intimidating, feeling like, oh, I'm joining the competition where you can win $100,000. It might seem like a big deal, but we do encourage you guys to join us and do the onboarding. So yeah, without further ado, we're going to start the Energy and Tech Day of Action for Earth Week. Welcome, guys. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Norman Crowley from CoolPlanet, who's going to tell you all about the solutions. This is all that we want to hear about. So, Norman, the stage is yours.
Cool. Good to see you all. It's amazing to see people from loads of different countries, and I think this is recorded. So if you're watching it on record later, then welcome. In the world of climate change, everyone is, for some reason, for the last 40 years, as long as we've been working on climate, there's been a tendency to try and resolve climate with shocking pictures like this one, or shocking slogans like this one. My background is building businesses, and in the 2000s, about 2003 or 4, I saw this film called An Inconvenient Truth, and it was all about how terrifying climate change was. And my children were quite young at the time. Now they're in their 20s, but at the time they were quite young. And so I was deeply concerned about this. And a bit like the founder of Earth Prize, Peter, I started to focus on how we might solve this problem. And so we set up CoolPlanet, which is our business. And we'll talk a little bit in this about what CoolPlanet does. Maybe just go back one. Yeah. One of the things that you see quite a lot around climate and climate change is anger, right? And people get angry about climate, especially if you're young. You might get angry because you might feel that you didn't cause this problem, and therefore you're suffering from the effects of it, right? Or quite a lot of people get angry at industrial companies or corporations about it. And so you get quite a lot of activism, and you get quite a lot of making other people wrong, right? And when we started off, that's the way we were. We were like, okay, there's this huge problem that almost seems unsurmountable or solvable. And who do I get angry with, right? So when we started looking at it, we started looking from there first. And the other thing that people think a lot about when they think about sustainability, and when people started to try and figure out how to solve climate change first, they started to talk about, well, the way to solve climate is to do less. So don't switch off your thermostats, don't waste electricity, don't drive big gas guzzling cars, and do more with less, okay? The problem with us as humans is we don't get very excited about that prospect, right? Because as humans, we like to get excited about the new phone or the new technology, AI, or whatever it is. And that's how we've developed as humans. We haven't developed as humans by doing less. We've developed as humans by doing better, doing more, right? So if you're trying to convince people that the way that you solve climate is by reducing, you won't get anywhere, which is why for 30 or 40 years, we haven't really achieved much in terms of climate. If you're feeling guilty about climate change, or you're angry about climate change, then you're not really going to get anywhere. In fear is not the driver of this, right? And guilt is not a driver of this. They are not the things that take us forward. So if you're working on Earthprise or you're worried about climate change, try to log in your head that if you're feeling angry at somebody else, or you're feeling guilty about climate, or you want to blame somebody, that's not a great emotion. Yeah. Yeah. I love the comment. Yeah. Love thy enemies, right? And actually, to go even deeper than that, they're not your enemies. They're just other people that look like you, right? Um, and so that's the way we look at this thing. There is no baddie in a corporation somewhere who is the enemy, right? That like a Marvel action movie, as long as you can slay that enemy, then you're the hero and they're the villain. The world doesn't work like that. The people who work in big polluting corporations are just people with a job, and they don't wake up in the morning and want to pollute. Okay. So then we find, as we solve this problem, that treating them with love and respect gets you much further than treating them like the enemy and somebody you should have an argument with. Yeah. So everybody in the world is the same. We all want the same thing, which is we all want freedom. We all want to educate our children. We want our family to be safe. We want everybody else to be safe. That's what everybody wants. And so when we start working on climate with that view, we'll get much further. Yeah. If you're going to move away from fear and guilt and move towards excitement and opportunity, then the world changes in all the ways you can imagine. And when you look at climate as an opportunity, you start to see a whole bunch of things you didn't see before. Like one of the ways to look at climate is the largest business opportunity in the history of mankind, right? So there has never been a bigger opportunity to have an amazing career, to work on something that's so exciting, right? And so to give you a number, climate and working in climate is currently a $5 trillion a year industry. So it's super exciting, right? And we'll actually talk today about lots of ways that are exciting in this. And the other thing to note is we have all the solutions today for to solve climate. We don't need more inventions. We already have the inventions. So solar, which is an incredible technology, has is the best way, mixed with wind and mixed with batteries, to solve almost all of the things. So if you have a big gas guzzling car, then we have more and more electric cars, and electric cars are brilliant, right? And they can be charged with solar, or they can be charged with wind. And when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, then we have batteries, and they will store the energy, and then we can call on that. So really, and I'll come on to meat in a second, but almost everything that causes climate change can be sorted with wind, batteries, and solar. And despite what you might hear in the press, because journalists aren't the most optimistic people in the world, and also angry people are not the most useful people in the world. So, but what's happening largely in the world at the moment is we are putting more solar, more wind, more batteries onto the ground everywhere. And that's happening at an unprecedented rate. It's never been faster than it is right now. So we will get there with solar and wind and battery. And yes, there are oil companies out there and they're doing okay, but we have already reached peak oil. So we have already gone past using oil and gas at its peak, and we are now on a slow decline, where more wind, more solar, more batteries are coming into the world. And that's going to accelerate to be much faster. There's much, much work to do, but there is an army of companies out there, us being one of them, um, that work on this. Okay. And so it's it's going to be choppy for a while, but we're over the worst of this. Okay. And we are now accelerating and accelerating and putting more solar, more wind, more batteries. The technology that we're not there yet on is meat, right? So if you're a vegetarian, good for you. But if you're a meat eater, that's okay, because we don't blame people who eat meat. Um, but how we solve the meat problem is there's a new technology that's coming to market called cellular agriculture. And what that is, that picture on the screen of the thing that looks like a burger, that's a burger. It's made out of meat, okay? But that meat that it's made out of was not made by killing an animal. It was actually made in a lab or in a thing called a bioreactor, right? And a bioreactor is just a stainless steel bucket that's temperature controlled, and we're able to grow meat from the cells themselves. And if you think about those technologies on the screen at the moment, we're very advanced with wind, we're very advanced with solar. We're now, in the last 5 years, extremely advanced in batteries. But in cell ag or cellular agriculture, we're still getting there. Yeah. But in the next couple of years, we're going to be very advanced on cell ag as well. And you'll hear lots of people knocking that technology. And that's what happens when we have a new technology. Back in the day, the internet was going to kill us all, right? And it turned out it was very good for us, right? And then social media was going to kill us all. And then eventually we figured out how to use social media, but not too much, right? Then electric cars weren't going to work, and now they're working, right? So similarly with cell ag, these technologies are all starting to work, but you have like a curve with them where first people mock them and they're very expensive, and then people start to accept them, and then they become commonplace. And so that's the cycle we're going through with all of these technologies. The thing to realize about all these technologies is they are all better for us than what came before. So energy that comes from wind and solar and battery is slowly becoming much cheaper than energy that comes from oil and gas, right? Um, Cell grown meat is much better for you because it doesn't have all the nasty things that are in meat, right? It's generally much cleaner, right? Electric cars, despite what some people say, are much better. They're much faster, which makes them a lot more fun. They're much cheaper to run. Um, and yes, you have range issues with them, but that's a problem that's now pretty much sorted. So the one thing that you might struggle to believe is that everything is better when these technologies come into play. And we're seeing that more and more all the time. And some people are a bit cynical about this, but they're generally wrong. Okay. And all this stuff is better. And we will live in a world where energy is much cheaper, which means we can do much more with it. And food is going to be much better for us as we go through this cycle. But you saw in that graph I put up earlier that we got to a peak that we're now over, which was using much more oil and gas. And now we're coming down the other side of that. And this is the biggest change in the history of humanity. Okay. And because of that change, it's going to take some time and it's going to be a little bumpy along the way. But as somebody who's worked in it for 15 years, I'm staggered by the speed that this is happening. Yeah. So, what we do is, we talked in the beginning about blame and who do we blame, right? So, rather than thinking about who do we blame, what we do is we work with the people that normally get blamed. Okay. So these are some of our clients, right? So we have a client called JBS, and JBS emits more carbon than France. Okay. And there's another client called Cargo, and Cargo emit more carbon than Holland. Yeah. And then Louis Dreyfus emits twice as much carbon as Ireland, which is where I'm sitting right now. Okay. So, but rather than saying these are awful people and we must get angry with these people and we must protest against these people, what our business does is we go to these people and we say, hey, wouldn't it be just better for you financially if you didn't emit so much carbon? Yeah. And so what we show them is that if they become more efficient and more green, they can save a lot of money and it can completely transform their business. Yeah. And so we are working with all these clients on the screen. And with them, we are saving them billions of dollars, right? And by saving them billions of dollars, we're also they're moving very fast to emit more or emit less carbon. But also, the reason they're moving very fast is because we're also saving them more money. Okay. And everybody wins in that situation. How we do this is that very large corporations who pollute quite a lot, when you pollute quite a lot and when you emit a lot of carbon, you're also wasting. It's waste, right? And companies hate wasting because they're wasting money, right? And so what we do is we show them how much money they're wasting, and then we use fancy technology using very fancy mathematics. So if you hate mathematics, then this is a reason to start loving maths. Is we use very fancy maths and very fancy AI and very fancy tech. Uh, and it starts off with AI and then it moves to things like solar and wind and batteries. And what we do with them is over maybe 5 years or 10 years, we get them to reduce their carbon emissions by huge amounts, right? And in the process of doing that, we also we save them money. So with our biggest client at the moment, they spend $4 billion a year on energy. And that $4 billion costs them a lot of money, but it also generates a lot of carbon, right? And so we're in a program with them at the moment that over 5 years, we're going to save them $1 billion. Um, and this is how we're doing it here. We're using a mixture of solar, wind, battery, and also just stopping them from wasting energy in all their factories. And it's phenomenal, right? Because instead of fighting with them, right, we work with them to save huge amounts. And so to give you an idea how much, I live in Ireland, which is a small country, an island off the west of Europe, okay? And every year now, we take out the same amount of carbon as Ireland. Yeah. We take out a country like Ireland every year using this technology. Right? So once you stop blaming and get away from anger and just work with the people and realize that they're not the enemy, and figure out how you can work with them, you can literally move mountains of carbon. So that's what we do. Okay. And I can answer questions about that. But again, a lot of what we do is kind of boring, right? It's math stuff and installing stuff and financing things. And in order to get people to move with us, um, you can we can show them all the fancy spreadsheets and numbers as much as we want, right? But a couple of years ago, we felt that the best thing to do was to not only show them in fancy spreadsheets how much money we could save them, but also blow their minds, right? In a different way. We're trying to inspire accountants, lawyers, food scientists, baristas. We're trying to inspire a lot of people. And like I said, blame does not inspire, right? What inspires is very cool stuff. Okay. And so if I'm talking to an accountant or I'm talking to a builder, maybe with an accountant, a spreadsheet might inspire them, right? But with most people, I want to show them something that's jaw droppingly cool. Okay. So what we did was we built a new business called Ava. And Ava stands for Ad Vitam Aeternum, which in Latin or in English, it means for life everlasting. Okay. So what we started doing was building things that blew people's minds. Okay. And because if you talk to an American or Americans in particular, they go, listen, these electric cars, they're kind of boring. And they don't really float my boat. Like you can't beat a V8 engine, right? So if you're gonna blow people's minds, you're gonna build a vehicle for them that is pretty eye-catching, pretty fast, and is uncompromisingly, jaw-droppingly exciting. And so this is one of those vehicles. It's the very first one we built, right? Um, and it's very fast. It does 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds. Yeah. So it's like driving a rocket ship. But when you build something like this, it's going to change people's minds about what's possible. And this is another one. So this is a 1980s Ferrari. Okay. So what people would say, what climate activists would say is this is a gas guzzling car and you shouldn't be driving it, right? But this is actually a car. It's a 1981 Ferrari 308, but this is electric, right? So it's very fast, very beautiful. And when you drive this down a street, it changes people's minds about what's possible. So, if you look closely at this vehicle on the screen, you'll notice that on the very front of it, it says the Earth Prize, right? So, and Peter McGarry, who founded Earth Prize, he came to us about 2 years ago and he said, you know, electric cars are great, but people think that they're made out of batteries and the batteries kill people because they're mined by children. The elements are mined by children and it's all bad. And he said, what I want to do as the founder of Earth Prize is I want to disprove all the theories about that people have about electric vehicles. And he said, I challenge you in Ava to build me a vehicle that's jaw-droppingly beautiful, that's fast, right? But also that's made of things that are 100% good for the planet. And so this is Earth Prize Defender. And we built this for Earth Prize and for Peter. And this car hangs out now in Geneva, where Earth Prize is based. And when this car drives down the street in Geneva, you can have the fanciest Ferrari, the fanciest Lamborghini. Well, you don't have this, right? And everybody that sees this vehicle, it just blows their mind, right? And it's the plastic in it is printed from fishing nets that have been rescued from the ocean. The batteries in it were built using non-conflict minerals, like most batteries nowadays are built. But also inside, it's the dash or the instruments are carved from thousand-year-old timber that was rescued from a bog, right? So this thing disproves everything that you think is impossible about climate change. And it's designed to change your mind about what's possible. Yeah. So a lot of change, it's what we said at the very beginning. Change doesn't happen from blame. Change doesn't happen from anger. Change happens by creating things that are completely beautiful. Yeah. And then getting those objects to change people's minds. So if you're going to radically change somebody's mind, we've talked earlier about you go to the enemy, okay? And if the enemy is a big corporation, then go to that corporation and talk to them about what's possible, right? So in the world of cars, then you go to the person who's designed the biggest gas guzzling cars in the world, right? So about 3 years ago, we went to a guy called Peter Brock, and Peter designed one of the most iconic muscle cars in the world, which is the Corvette Stingray. And then another car he designed was this car you see on the screen, which is called the Daytona, right? And Peter is quite an old man, right? He's 88 years old. And what we did with Peter, we didn't know Peter, right? And Peter is based in Las Vegas. And so what we did was we picked up the phone and we found Peter. And Peter has built the biggest muscle cars in the world, big engines, big pollution, right? And we said, "Hey, Peter, um, would you like to reimagine your most famous car as an electric vehicle, um, and then rebuild it with us as an electric car?" And he said he got very emotional. He actually cried on the call, and he said, "I would love the last car I ever built to be an electric car." Yeah. And so we built that car you saw on the screen, which is called the Daytona. And the Daytona is incredibly beautiful. And again, it's designed to change people's minds by inspiring them. Yeah. And and so that's what that vehicle is. Yeah. Um, so how you affect change in climate is you inspire people with beauty and into changing. And then they want to change, not because they're feeling guilty, but because they want to move towards something that's exciting and beautiful. And that's when we wake up in the morning, that's what we do. It's not easy, right? But it does bring us a lot of joy. And so what we say is we're not here to tell people what they can't do. We're here to build something better, which is a life without limits on this planet. Yeah. And so, and for you guys as students, like you're, how do you do that? You learn the stuff you're learning. um you like how we solve this problem is with maths, with geography, with all of the things that we're learning. And then we don't become cynical, we become optimistic. We think, what can we design that's so cool that people will get so excited about it that they'll move towards that. And we don't get cynical, we just get optimistic and we drive incredibly hard for change. And along the way, actually, we make more money than other companies. And that's good too. So everybody wins. Yeah. So that's what we do.